This is the graphic translation vectorization lecture for the ART161 graphic design course. Now, as we spoke in the previous lectures, the goal to this assignment is to simplify, which is the process of making something simpler and allows you to easily understand and recognize what that object is. We're also looking at abstraction, reducing something down to its most basic shapes to help you communicate that more effectively, as well as stylization or interpretation. And this is where you get to put some of your own influence on the mark. So all of these go hand in hand to create a complete form and think about the extraction of partial features in order to communicate the subject more effectively. And when we think as designers and we think of rendering a subject, we're usually thinking about simplifying its original outline, allowing the viewers to easily understand its uniqueness or to make it more memorable. Now, some believe it is necessary to use simplification to abstract interesting aspects from an uninteresting subject. This is a painting by the artist Paul Cézanne, who was skilled in the use of simplification. And in Cézanne's work in 1892, titled The Card Players, he made use of human poses and facial expressions to show the moods of gamblers in this sort of tense atmosphere of this gambling den. Now, another artist came along in 1916 to 1917 named Theo van Doesburg, and he shows a more simplification of this painting that was originally created by Cézanne. And what he does is he goes in and starts to simplify the elements of the original forms into these more geometric shapes. And he also used these geometric forms to reinforce the sort of tension and the standoff between these three parties. Now, obviously, this is taking something and putting more stylization to this. Even the dominoes up in the corners kind of plays into less of a realistic interpretation, but we're still able to kind of decipher what's going on within this image. Now, Doesburg went back later on and did a second iteration, which really totally abandoned the limitations of the original structure of the image. Here, if you weren't to see the original painting, you may not even know what this is originally trying to interpret. It may just look like a bunch of different shapes. So you may say that the abstraction's gone too far, but again, this was an experiment that the artist was doing. So we can see this sort of progression of both abstraction and stylization and simplification of these forms. Now, in this assignment, again, you're taking two different objects, one that's mechanical and one that's object, and and one that's organic, and trying to communicate those basic forms through these basic shapes. Now, in both of these cases here, we have something that is taking a two-dimensional form and trying to make it almost feel three-dimensional in some spaces, especially over here on the binoculars on the left. The line directions that are being used starts to articulate those curves, but there's also parts of this image that are being omitted. They're not showing every technical aspect of this mechanical object. They're also playing with the highlights and the lowlights to create closure and more of a figure ground relationship. Same thing over here on the right. They're really simplifying the different forms here of this owl's face. They're putting much more sort of stylized approach. And they're also using similar line qualities here to tie these two objects in together. Now, if we look at where we're at within the process, we took an original image and brought that into Photoshop. And this is used to help you to start to articulate these basic forms. We can see in the original image up here in the top left, it's very detailed with all the feathers, but as soon as we use some of the posterize and threshold effects, it already starts to simplify that form for us. And when you get into your sketches, you may work with something that is slightly more detailed at first and slowly start to omit parts of that design. How can you break this down into basic shapes and create more of a stylized approach? Now, something like the sketch over here on the right is going to be much easier to graphically translate in Adobe Illustrator and be more effective using the pen and shape tools. So once you have your sketches and they're simplified, abstracted, and stylized, how can we start to vectorize these? Well, it's important to consider the approach for each translation. Consider whether it would be best to create different shapes and strokes to combine, or if it is better to start with more of an overall silhouette and extract portions of the design. And we're going to look at both of those here. So this is an example of a koi fish, and the sketch is simplifying this down into this basic sort of circular shape with these fins, these interior sort of shapes here that are organic, and these two shapes that articulate the eyes. Now, in this case here, you may go about this by combining different shapes and strokes. You can see here that the red outlines in the middle rendering here are strokes. They are a closed shape. They do not have a fill to them. That is partnered with these exterior blue shapes here, which articulate the fins and the tails, and then these interior purple shapes that are organic. And once you change all of those to black, you can see that it creates this more silhouetted effect of the form. So that is one way to go about this, combining different shapes and strokes. And you can also use the shape builder tool, which we'll go over in the tutorial. So go back to that original sort of sketch that you have, that original form as you're going through this. It's okay to bring these into Adobe Illustrator as well and reference these as you're working. Try to think about that simplification of these basic forms and how that can be used to create those. Now, another approach to the subject would be to create a full silhouette of that object and then start to extract parts of that form. So here we have the original image and a sketch of the owl based on that image. And you can see that we have this closure and positive and negative space where the white bleeds all the way out to the page. So to go about this, you would want to outline the entire shape first, creating a full outline of the shape. You can see that done here in black right below. Then you would go and put shapes on top of that articulate some of the interior forms. If we look up at the wing here on the top, you can see that we have this organic shape, and that is being drawn as a new shape on top of that silhouette. And you can continue to add wherever you see the white of your paper. Now, these shapes are drawn in orange, so we can see these, but as soon as we turn those to white, those will bleed into the paper. And the beauty about using this approach, the silhouette and extraction approach versus the shape and strokes, is that you can create a little bit more variation much easier. So here we have two different variations of the wing, and those are just used with new shapes on top of the black silhouette. Instead of having to go back and retrace that entire form, you can easily swap out elements and make adjustments within that form. This can also be used to show different highlights and lowlights much easier within the variations of the form. Now, if you're dealing with an object that is more symmetrical, this can often be drawn most efficiently by drawing half of the object and then copying and reflecting the drawn half to complete the other side. The two halves will need to be joined or merged together, but this will create perfect symmetry within the object that you are translating. If an object has multiple parts that are very similar, such as these fan blades here, you can take that original object and duplicate that within a circular form or an organic form, and that can create that, again, much more exact continuity between those forms within the space. So you can see them doing that with the fan blades as well as the exterior of the fan shapes here. Now, once you have closed shapes, a full shape that has a fill to it, again, you can go back and think about ways to create the illusion of a light source by putting new shapes on top of that. By adding new shapes on top of the black silhouette, you can show the light source coming, in this case, from the right-hand side to create more of a descriptive form where we don't even see part of the right-hand side of the body here, but our mind sort of fills in the gap, creating that closure and positive and negative space. And these are examples from the readings in the module for the graphic translation book. You're going to be creating 2 different graphic translations in total based off of your sketches. So you're going to choose one of your sketches, and you may end up combining different elements of your sketches, and that's totally fine. This is all a process. But eventually you're going to create one graphic translation for a mechanical object and one graphic translation for your organic object. Here we see the process again of the original images found, the Photoshop treatments that were done to the chosen image, the original sketches on the left, and the graphic translation options on the right. Another example here of sketches converted into these graphic translations. And that concludes the Adobe Illustrator Vectorized Translation lecture for the ART161 class. Please refer back to the module to look at the tutorial and assignment sheet, and let me know if you have any questions.